Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 live stream for the Fedex St. Jude Championship. Gonna break down props and DFS for tomorrow and make sure we're ready to go out there and have ourselves a great start to the weekend, which honestly, we just gotta run back today, right? If we could take the same results, just copy and paste them for Friday, I think everyone out there would be pretty ecstatic. Whether it's for main slate where we got off to quite the start here after the first 18 holes. Long way to go there, though, so definitely far from finished. And then over for props, we made over $3,000 over there on the Patreon. So a direct tail would have netted you 3 racks today. Of course, I know a lot of you may have a smaller unit size, but either way, still should have been quite lucrative for you. So definitely really stoked about that, really happy about this way that we've gotten this week started off. But again, the job's not done, right? We've got 3 more rounds to work with. And like I said, even more opportunity to go out there and get some value. So welcome on in. If you're joining the chat, go ahead, say hi to all of us down there. You got Anthony who says, thank you for what you do, your friend. Enjoy the content. Enjoy you. I appreciate you, Anthony. So appreciate the, kind words from you. And let's run it back for today. What's going on, Branica? We got Colby down there. We've got Antonio, James. Hopefully you're all having a solid Thursday evening out here. So without further ado, if you're saying hi, of course, I'll see you in the corner of my eye. But let's start talking some golf, shall we? So if we first off take a look at today's results, you'll see that it played super easy. I mean, a stroke and a half under par is significantly easier than what we typically see this golf course play. And I guess I can say I told you so, right? Yesterday, I mentioned how easy, the kind of birdie fest that you should expect to see. And that is exactly what we got, right? There were receptive greens. There were next to no winds out there. And you saw the players take advantage. If you're not a huge, fan of scoring, you don't like seeing, 4, 5, 6 under par kind of scores. My boy Jordan Spieth going out there and shooting a 7 under par, then you're not going to like tomorrow because it's pretty much the same situation. So if I go over here, I click the HRRR model, you'll see that there's going to be next to no sustained winds the entire day. I mean, literally a max of 4 miles an hour. Now, towards the PM hours, when people are finishing up their round, right, they'll probably finish around like 4 to 5 p.m. local time. There's going to be like 11 to 12 mile an hour wind gusts, but that's nothing, right? I mean, if we're going to nitpick about it and say that the PM wave might play a little bit harder, I think that you could say that the greens might firm up a little bit, especially because it will be sunny. It's also going to be like 90 degrees. So I could definitely see that argument, but there's not going to be any wind out there again. So with damp conditions, you're not going to see any of that rain really evaporate overnight. I mean, this course is going to be there for the taking again. So this sort of average score, right, of like 1.4 under par is probably pretty, I would say it'd be a pretty good average for tomorrow, right there for Friday's round there. It's going to depend on setup. They can move tee boxes. They could give us a few gimme pin locations out there for tomorrow as well. So there are a few X factors that'll contribute to it. But if you want to use today as a barometer of what to expect, I think that's a pretty good standard to go by. In terms of Showdown, in terms of like a weather edge, if you want to go with the early tee times, you can. They'll be teeing off from like 10 a.m. local time, I believe, up until, what's the last set? We can just double check on it here, I guess. Let me bring up the page. I believe it's like maybe 1:15 local time might be the last tee time that we have. But luckily, it's posted on the PGA site, and we don't have to guess. So let's go ahead and just bring it up. So 1 second, bear with me here, and let's go through them. So first tee time is actually, this is an Eastern, so keep in mind, right, that this is 1 hour ahead of local time. So it'll be 10:15 local, and the last tee time will be at actually 12:27 p.m. So even a little bit earlier than I thought before. So if there's going to be any sort of edge out there, right? Maybe the first few groups have slightly better conditions than what you have for the rest of the day, but nothing that I think is actionable, right? It's much more about the ownership, which is going to be very much so correlated to how a player went out there and scored in round 1. So there'll be players that you want to tail that had a really good day today, right? And of course, you're going to have to take guys that had a pretty shitty round one, right? If all the ownership is going to be around the guys that went out there and killed it for Thursday, well, you're going to have to make a few tough decisions and mix in a few guys that maybe didn't have their A game or their fastball today. So, the whole weather thing, I guess, is more important from the prop side, more important just for perspective of what to expect in terms of scoring. And when you see, if you have my Patreon, it's blacked out on here on the spreadsheet, but my projections for round 2 showdown are exceptionally high. You can see for a few of the players we have here, right, nearly 46 points for Jon Rahm, 44 for a Hovland, nearly 43 for Ricky Fowler. In terms of a median projection, right, those are, exceptionally higher than what you have for most slates. So I'm expecting it to play easy. I think you're going to see a lot of 5, 6, maybe even like a 7, 8 under par round like you saw today. And you're going to have that when it comes to showdown. So let's go through chat, see what's going on. We got no one cares down there. Lucrative. So you're talking about a narrative. Okay, let's go on to Peach. Good job today. Of course. Is the screen out of focus? You might need to refresh on your end. Looks good over here, but if not, someone else let me know. Maybe it might be an issue for other people too, but let's get that fixed for you, Anthony. You might want to refresh it. Well, let's go through this. So I'll make it a little bit bigger so that everyone can see. When you're playing round 2 showdown and there's not really a weather edge to play, it's all about game theory, right? Kind of like I was saying, it's about taking the right pivots and then taking the right pieces of chalk. Now, for Sunday showdown, right, we have to go after some of the top end of the board because we have to go after at least a little bit of placement points, right? We've got to get the winner normally. For Sunday showdown, we've normally got to mix in a few other top 5s. That's not the case here for round 2 showdown, right? This is a no-cut event. We're only on round 2, so there are no placement points to speak of. We're much more worried about just pure old upside, right? And when you're going to have low-owned guys like a Rahm and a Victor Hovland here. You can see I've got Rahm 10%, Victor Hovland there at just a solid 9% right there. The only reason they're low-owned is because they played shitty today, right? +3 for Jon Rahm, +2 for Victor Hovland. Guys like Scotty, Rory, Xander, Patrick Cantlay are getting all of the ownership up top. It's very predictable. I guess it makes sense, right? My projections for those players are slightly higher than their counterparts, but it's not worth them being, in most cases, and at least definitely in these cases up here, like 3-4 times higher owned, right? There's a limit to the madness. So when I'm playing round 2 showdown, it's all about game theory for me, right? I'm going out there, figuring out who the obvious chalky plays are going to be, and then oftentimes just fading them blindly, right? And in this case, it's Scotty, right? It's Rory McIlroy, right? It's Xander, Patrick Cantlay, right? Like super mega stars out there. But then at a third of the ownership, we've got Jon Rahm, right? Like, for goodness sakes, right? Let's forget who he is, right? It's still top 3 player in the world. You've got Victor Hovland, who's the showdown god, right? Guy holds out for eagle all the time. He's capable of rattling off 6, 7, 8 birdies in a round just like that, right? He's that kind of streaky player that you always want to get that kind of exposure to in showdown. I'm going to make those pivots. So it's not for the faint of heart, right? I'm taking the low-owned players as a calculated gamble. If you want to take a chalky guy up here, that's fine. But try and find one pivot, right? Maybe it's a Hovland for you. Maybe it's a Ricky Fowler. There are a few other pivots you could consider, like a Terrell Hatton, right? A Wyndham Clark's going to be relatively low-owned. Matty Fitz, Sam Burns we'll talk about later. Brian Harmon, if you wanted to get there. Just mix in one player, right, to kind of make yourself a little bit different, right? You don't want to have, 6 popular players, right, with all 6 of your players in your lineup. You've got to have 1 or 2 kind of pivots, and they're very predictable, right? Ownership for round 2 showdown, even if you weren't on my Patreon page and didn't have access to my projections, right, you could kind of guess who the high-owned players are going to be, right? It's the guys at the top of the leaderboard, right? If I were to sort this by current score, it wouldn't be exact in terms of ownership. For Sunday showdown, sometimes it is exact when it comes to the leaderboard and then the ownership. But here for round 2 showdown, it's very so correlated, right? I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not exact, but at the top of the board, it's all the guys that are high owned. So keep that in mind when you're building, right? Take a few chalky pieces, but make sure you're mixing in these kind of pivots. So I like Hovland because of his upside, right? Like I said, just a high birdie player, kind of real streaky. Ricky Fowler, he just couldn't buy a putt today. He made nothing from 10 to 15 feet. The ball striking was really good, actually. Maybe not the best off the tee, but was hitting some darts to that 15-foot range out of the Bermuda rough, which, he's used to it down in South Florida. He's very, familiar with this kind of golf, with like wet, humid, these kind of greens, this kind of grass out there. He plays on it all the time down here in South Florida. So yeah, I like Ricky Fowler out there too. And he's coming in low owned, right? Only 8.8%, which is like 3 times lower owned, or at least I'd say at least like 2.5 times lower owned than Patrick Cantlay there. Down here in the 8K range, there's a lot of chalk, like Jordan Spieth, right? Colin Morikawa, Tommy Fleetwood are also extremely popular. I know Morikawa's actually 20% plus. Tommy Fleetwood's in the high teens when it comes to his ownership. So if you're going to play those two players, just know that, right? It doesn't mean that you have to fade them, right? You can still take them, but just know that they're coming with ownership and they're not going to be that pivot that you're looking for, right? You're going to have to do that with one of your other lineup spots. In this 8K range, I do like a Tony Finau. He feels a little bit too cheap to me. And at -3, when there's a bunch of guys that are kind of in that same kind of range, they all eat at each other's ownership. And down here in this 8K range, there's a lot of guys who had decent rounds today. So Tony Finau, rather than being like 20, maybe 25% owned, like some of the chalky guys in the 9K range, he's only 13.7%. So I know it's a little bit higher than some of the other players that we're getting to, but we're also getting Tony Finau. He had a pretty damn good round, right? So, there's still chalky pieces that I'm taking. In fact, Scotty Scheffler, for example, I'll just tell you this. I'm playing Scotty Scheffler tomorrow, right? Like, so just because he's mega chalky up top doesn't mean that you have to avoid him, right? It's that when you're using somebody like that, you have to compensate elsewhere. So, that's always the case with round 2 showdown. I just go over this in case you're new and whatnot, but that's the idea with the player pool, right? There's going to be chalky pieces that we're getting to, and then the Sam Burns of the world, right? Who's the opposite, right? Who's a low owned pivot play that I'm using to get that differentiation. He shot +3. He was chalky going into this week. And then now here, just because of one shitty round, now for Friday, he's only 8.7% owned, right? We call that value, right? Both in terms of price and then when it comes to ownership. We've got Sepp Straka, same thing, right? He's lower owned and lower priced because of his round today. And he finished second, right? Runner up to Will Zalatoris in a playoff year last year. Steven Jaeger is one of the most aggressive, streaky players that you'll get on all of the PGA Tour, right? He's like a first round leader just waiting to happen. He's a showdown ceiling round just waiting to happen. So I like him at relatively low ownership. My player pool is just full of these kind of guys. Harris English, right? Another piece of chalk, kind of similar to a Sam Burns, right? A Sepp Straka that failed in round 1, right? He only shot even par, right? Worse than the field average. Now you can get him at a lower price and a lower ownership level, which is always going to make me a buyer, right? I understood why Harris English was getting the ownership, right? I understood why people were playing Sepp Straka this week, right? 2 players that I faded for main slate, but not at those ownership levels, right? It's a completely different story now that we have them at these prices and then at these ownership numbers. Down here in the 6Ks, you've got Keith Mitchell, just a high upside player that, again, kind of like a Hovland, right, can just get super nuclear hot. It has that ceiling rounds quite often, or at least a lot more than his peers. You have somebody like an Adam Schenk at -1. He's just a much better player than the price tag, right? In terms of the modeling, right? He was number 20 in terms of course fit. Those are the kind of guys that I'm playing for Showdown, right? And because he only shot -1, right? Only -1, right? Like 0.4 shots worse than the field average. He's 4.4% owned. Whereas if Adam Schenk would have shot like -3, -4, he would be like 10% owned, right? Like a Taylor Moore, who's higher owned than an Adam Schenk. Or going down here to a Tom Hoagie, right? He's getting some steam, right? Kurt Kitayama, right, is getting steam now that he shot a -4 round. Whereas Adam Schenk, who was a better player than all of the rest, right, was higher owned for main slate contest, isn't getting that steam just because he didn't have a ceiling round. And the one thing people don't realize about golf is just because he played well on one day does not mean you're going to the next, right? Unlike a lot of other sports like baseball, where like a hitter will get hot, pitchers even get hot. In a lot of sports, right? That's a thing, right? Get on a hot streak. In golf, it's almost harder to go out there and have a good round after you had a ceiling round before. You'll hear it all the time, right? It's even harder to back up a good round than it is to go out there and even have that round to begin with. So it's just in golf, you got to treat it a little bit differently, right? Maybe you're new to golf, you haven't heard that before. Very common though. It's a very common saying. You'll hear it all the time from players. So it's not just ownership. It's not just game theory that we're going with here. We're going off of literal quotes from players, right, that have told us how difficult that kind of fact is. Other than that, those are a few players that I wanted to point out. Of course, my entire player poll is posted on my Patreon page. They've got ownership for everybody, but it's all very predictable, right? The ownership is centered, around the guys at the top of the board. If you were chalky going into the week and you had a round there for Thursday, you're going to be mega chalky for round 2, right? That's just like the ultimate recipe for going out there and getting steam. So just to give you a few of those players, right? Like Colin Morikawa, Tommy Fleetwood, right? They were already chalky going into the week, and now they went out there and shot like 4 or 5 under par, right? Like those kind of players going to be mega chalky out there for Friday. So that's what I'll leave you with. In terms of DFS out there. And now we'll go through a few questions in terms of DFS, and afterwards talk some props. Where are we at? Rom, big bounce back day tomorrow. Followed his round 1 with just a few off the tee shots. Yeah, and it was all done early, right? All the damage was done early from the first 5-6 holes. I agree. He looked a lot better for the last 4 or 5. I'm getting to him tomorrow for sure. Morikawa, sneaky or chalk. He'll be a little bit chalky, but if you want to play him, that's perfectly fine, right? Just compensate somewhere else. Glover, I could see it. He'll be a little bit chalky too. So kind of like a Morikawa, more than fine playing him, right? He has been in form, right? He won the last time out. So that's the understatement of the century there, right? Me calling him in form, but he is coming with ownership, right? Just to give you an idea, I'll give you his ownership number. Let me double check on the other tab here. So Lucas Glover, he's cheap, right? 7,500, 13.5%. So if you're going to play him, use him in at least a quarter of your lineups. Faded Spieth, need him to screw up tomorrow. Don't even say such things, Mike Burton. In fact, if I see that kind of Spieth slander down in the chat again, it's not going to be tolerated. You're going to get booted out of here. This is a pro Spieth community, and I don't know. Yeah, that sucks for you. You should have played him this week. That's all I'll say. It was honestly a pretty obvious play in my opinion. Jordan Spieth checked every box this week, literally every box. Let's take a look at a few lineup construction notes. Afterwards, we're going to talk some props. So if you do have any DFS questions, now is the time. So any deep dives on the players, any lineup notes, right? Trying to get like a 1-on-1, a 2-on-2. Now is the time for that. So go ahead and drop those down in chat. Speaking of, I'm going to throw the link for the community contest down in chat now as well. It's the $5 single entry on there. You can play for bragging rights, a little bit of money, and of course to have your lineup reviewed. So yeah, the link is down below. You can go ahead and check that out. And yeah, we'll do it for round 3 and 4 as well. And of course, we'll do the weekly review stream on Monday, and I will be taking a look at the week-long contest there. But speaking of round 2, a little bit of lineup construction stuff. If you're trying to take a look at like how you're building your lineups, it's very similar to the main slate. You've got a few guys up here in the 11K range. So if you wanted to stack a few players up there, you can, right? Because the bottom of the 6Ks is full of legit players, right? Like we talked about Keith Mitchell as an option, right? Adam Schenk would be like $7,500 in most fields, and you're getting them at the mid 6K range. So the price tags of like 11K on these like elite tier options, in that context, it makes a little bit more sense, right? Now, for most showdown slates, right, normally the most expensive players like 11.3, so they are more expensive than most, but you can make it work. It's a byproduct of how soft the pricing is down low. I mean, like Davis Riley 6,200 is like ridiculous. Same thing for Nick Taylor. I mean, that's just, we're not used to seeing that kind of pricing. So Draftkings has incorporated that into the lineup construction, and you can pretty much play whoever you want, right? When you have players that are usable and it's like multiple down there in the 6K range or even like the low 6s, you can literally play whoever you want. And if you want to be more balanced about it, I mean, you can like really go crazy about it. So like if you wanted to start like a Rom Hovland, right, take both of those two. Let's go ahead and throw Tony Finau in there. Let's throw Sam Burns into this. Actually, I guess you can't, right? I mean, that'd be overdoing it. But you could take these three players, right? I mean, look how much salary that is. Just ridiculous. It's like $30,000 and still build a feasible lineup, right? Throw Adam Schenk in there. Let's throw, who else do we want to throw in there? I guess we'll throw Mitchell, right? There at $6,600. And all you have to do is take somebody at 6,800 or below. That's, I don't know, right? You have 3 6K golfers, but normally these guys are at least $7,000, $7,500. So it's a weird slate. I imagine building a lot of these studs and duds kind of lineups, especially because I'm building 50 lineups here for round 2. But I'll also have quite a few balanced builds, right? This 7, 8K range, the bottom end of the 9K range is also pretty stacked. Like Terrell Hatton, he makes a lot of sense. You could throw like Max Homa into lineups. Obviously, I like Finau. Matty Fitz would be a pivot. Like you could just live in this 8K range if you wanted to, and then live in the 7K range for the rest of your lineup. So in terms of lineup construction, it's wide open. And even more wide open than usual because of how cheap you can go down here in the 6K range, and especially how cheap I'll be going here for round 2. So it's an interesting slate. We'll leave it at that. For cash, I wouldn't play cash tomorrow. I don't see a weather edge, and when there's not a weather edge for cash, I normally don't play it. Let's see. Somebody doesn't like Burns. That kind of attitude is going to make you a losing player long-term, Jennifer. And I'm not picking on you here. It's just facts. When you're going out there and you're playing DFS, you can't hold grudges. People are going to have bad weeks. Even when they look like fantastic plays, sometimes it's not going to work out. And if you have that kind of emotional reaction and never play a guy again, hugely negative EV, right? People take advantage of that. It's why we also played Denny McCarthy this week, right? Obviously had a really bad week last week. I went right back to the well. What's he do? It's up there in the top 15 right now, right? So cool it. I would say cool it with that, Jen. Hey, if you're going to do it, that's fine. Just gives us better ownership going forward on that player. But it's a no-cut event. He's got 3 more rounds to work with, too. He might just surprise you there by the end of the weekend. I'll say that much. Underdog props are up. Yeah, I saw that too. I know my boy Crush mentioned that down in chat, but for sure. What's going on, Self Gaming? Hopefully you're having a solid Friday here. Let's take a look at a few props, shall we? Obviously today was a smash day with the props, and hopefully can run it back here, huh? You can see up here. I don't know if you guys can see the good old balance. It started at 2,500 today, and it's safe to say it's a lot higher now. I'll just show you, right? It's up to 6,300 up there. We had ourselves a day, to say the least. Let's go through it, though. So in terms of prompts, it looks a little bit better over here in Underdog than Prize Picks. And I don't think I was expecting to say that. They do have Rory at 67 strokes, which I know was also his projection over there on Prize Picks. But at least on a few players, it looks like we have slightly higher projections. Maybe it's only like 1 or 2. So yeah, I guess most of the board looks pretty similar to Prize Picks. We have a lot more options for birdies, which is great to see, right? We're going to have definitely some overs on birdies that we can consider, and potentially a few spots of value with strokes. It looks like at least towards the top. Let me see. Let me double check on it. Was Tom Kim at 68 strokes on Prize Picks? I thought he was, right? Yeah. So that's a half stroke discrepancy right there with a Tom Kim. Not that I'm going to take this. I just want to throw it in there to know what the discrepancies are. Like Sanjay, I believe, was also at that same projection, right? So yeah, there are some half stroke discrepancies, it looks like. We have a lot more birdie selection over here. And let's see. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's comparable. Yeah, so there's a lot of guys at 4 birdies over here on Prize Picks. Let's see if there's any value, right? Any guys at 4 here on Underdog that are maybe at 4.5 over there on Prize Picks. So let's just do a little quick scan. They do have 5 on Rory. He's obviously 4.5 on Prize Picks. What about Cam Davis? Well, I have him up. So yeah, no Cam Davis props up. All right. What is his birdie or better matchup? No birdie or better matchup board up yet. Sometimes that's a good way to comp it. So they got Bryant Harmon at 4. Rom's also at 5. All right, interesting. See, 4.5 for Homa. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to get that birdie or better value that I was talking about, but we definitely have a few strokes props of value over here on the underdog side. Like Sepp Straka at 69. I believe he's also 68.5 on Prize Picks. That or even not on the board. But let's double check. See, they got Sepp up here. Sepp Straka doesn't look like it. I think if they did, he would probably be at 68.5. Right? He'd be pretty comparable to like a Steven Yeager at the very worst, I'd say, in terms of his talent level. And they've got him at 69 strokes. So yeah, I would say there are spots of value that we'll be able to take advantage of. I just wish, especially with the rolls over here on Underdog, that there were better birdie props. Like what do they have Burns over here on Prize Picks? He's probably at 4 birdies, right? Because he had a shitty round 1. They probably feel comfortable posting him. Let's see. No, so he's not even posted over there. That's probably for good reason. So just as of right now, knee-jerk reaction, these look like the best 2 props on the board. Now, I want to do a little bit more line shopping. We can take a look at some of the fantasy score props. Those were really solid for round 1 too. We were able to take advantage. And yeah, they definitely priced it up. So the fantasy scoreboard definitely a little bit higher than what we had for round 1. But maybe it's not high enough, right? We'll have to do some little bit of projection work here on stream. But we can find something out. So let's see. Any questions down there? Any thoughts on LIV? There's a LIV event tomorrow? You sure about that? I didn't know if there was a LIV event tomorrow, to be honest. Let me bring up their site. Is there? Yeah, Bedminster, right? Is it the one in New Jersey? Now it's coming to me. Yeah, I think there is. Let's look at the golf course together. We can do that. There's no props up or anything, so we can just, kind of do a little cursory glance at it. Yeah, it starts tomorrow. You're right. All right. Piece of ice just went down the wrong tube, I think. If you think it's ice and it'll melt, we'll be good. All right, so it's a par 71. It's got 3 par 5s. Okay, so very typical par 71. And it's pretty long. It's 7,500 yards. The other thing I know is that the rough at the golf course, from what I've seen, looks pretty gnarly too. So when we're going to get a board here at some point, which has Prize Picks posted anything? Not yet. Let's refresh. Maybe Underdog has. You never know. Nope, not yet. All right, so maybe they will at some point. It's probably going to play hard. So depending on the pricing, maybe there's going to be fades to be had, but maybe they overreact, right? Maybe they see the rough videos. Maybe they see it's 7,500 yards and they overcompensate, right? Maybe they post guys at like 3.5 birdies that are just really good birdie makers. Like it all depends on the pricing that we get. So my thoughts would be that the golf course is going to play hard, but it's not going to be impossible, right? It's a LIV Golf setup. They don't try and embarrass the players out there. I haven't looked at the weather this week. That's something that I'll probably do before I go out there and place any bets, any prop bets. If it's been raining there, maybe it counterbalances it, right? If they're going to get soft, receptive greens, I could see them going out there and potentially scoring decently, but probably it's going to come down to the pricing, right? Like I could see them overcompensating. I could see them doing the exact opposite, right? I could see them going out there and way overpricing it just because it's a LIV event, posting guys still at like 5.5 birdies. We'll have to see. I guess it comes down to that. So we're still going to go through a few of the prop boards over here for PGA, but yeah, hopefully they post a LIV board. That'd be pretty nice. Jock Market nerfed golf payouts. It's probably because we absolutely destroyed them today. I made 6x over there on Jock Market. So that's kind of unfortunate. Would they change by curiosity? I haven't been able to check myself. Yeah, Bedminster. Yeah, it should be a fun event. I like difficult events, especially over there for LIV. Like when the team winning scores like minus 38, or like last week it was like minus 49 or something like that. It gets a little out of hand, right? It feels a little bit like an exhibition, right? When it plays that easy. Somebody shoots 58. I mean, that was cool to see, but like that's crazy. And it wasn't just the golf course. Like obviously Bryson went out there, had a really good round. But this week, obviously, you're not going to see that kind of score. Like it's going to be much more difficult. It's a nice fresh breath of air. Like we've had a lot of really easy golf courses. I mean, even like the Open Championship wasn't that difficult. Kind of nice to see a difficult, like long, rough kind of golf course. You think today was your most profitable day ever betting on golf? That's awesome to hear, dude. Probably not dollar-wise for me, but just in terms of like sheer volume, I put in a shit ton of slips today and a shit ton of them hit. It felt pretty good for sure. Whether it'll be good tomorrow, did you see it playing easier or harder? It's going to play real similar, Nico. So for my full weather thoughts, make sure to go to like the first like 5 minutes. I talk about it there. But yeah, it's low winds again. I'm actually going to refresh it, make sure that it hasn't changed on us here. But yeah, look at it. So it's pretty much no sustained wind. And then the wind gusts, they get a little bit higher at the end of the day, like the last like few hours of play. But it's like 10 to 12 miles an hour. I mean, it's like nothing. So yeah, I would say comparable to today. And in terms of a scoring average, I think it's going to be very close to this like 1.4 under par. Now, they can move tee boxes. I mentioned before that they might move and make a few like easy pin locations. It's hard to really say how that's going to affect the golf course, but probably close to this 1.4 under par. Let's see where we at. Any other questions? All right, let's go through some of the props. So over here on Prize Picks, you know, they're really expecting this to play easy. They did have Cam Young at 4 birdies earlier. They obviously bumped that one up to 4.5. Same thing with Hideki. He was also at 4 birdies. And it looks like they have a happy trigger finger. I mean, they had Rory before at like 68 strokes. He got bumped down. I know they had guys like Cantlay at 68.5 strokes, and now he's at 67.5. So they've done a lot of bumping over here already. And frankly, I haven't even touched the board yet because I do think it plays easy, but like at a certain point, you start to overdo it, right? So I think they're going to be fades and supportive stances to be taken. I don't think it's as straightforward as a slate that we had today, right? Where I said, okay, it's going to play easy, take all unders. You know, clearly now they're pricing for that. So you've got to account for that. We've got to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach, which means we've got to take a look at shots gained metrics, right? We've got to see, you know, how they got their round one done, right? Whether it was all with the putter, right? Which makes it a little bit unsustainable. Whether they went out there and killed it with the ball striking and, you know, they have a relatively high floor for Friday. That all matters when you have a board that's a little bit better priced. So that's how I'm going to attack the board. I think over an Underdog, like I said, a few better spots of value. I think that the board might be priced in our favor just a little bit more over there on Underdog. So if you're going to try and get early exposure, it's probably best to do it over there. And I guess before I fire on this card, I just want to see if it's really the best value available. We're going to do a deep dive of the board here. So the bogey props, like they just feel a little risky. Like I would lean under at 2.5 on a lot of those, but like I said, it kind of feels risky. So I would fade them more often than not. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably going to be these two. The reason why I picked Burns is he's one of the higher birdie percentage players on tour, right? Like I know he had the bad round today. I know somebody before was just devastated by his round today. But, you know, he could very easily go out there and shoot 6-7 under par. That's just golf, right? You have bad days sometimes. So I don't hate that for Burns. This fantasy score prop could be the move if he's going to have like a clean round. Like if Sam Burns can go out there and not make a bunch of birdies, bogeys, I should say. We wanted to make a bunch of birdies, obviously. But if he could avoid bogeys, that might be the move for him too. So yeah, I was looking at Sepp Straka's fantasy score just to see like, you know, where they had him at. But the difference between 26 and 30 fantasy points, actually, sorry, not 26, like 23 in 29, 30 fantasy points is 1 birdie. It makes a huge difference. You get a whole point also for every score under par that you have. Consecutive birdies, you get an extra point, all that sort of fun stuff. So getting to 30 fantasy points, it really just takes like making 4 birdies and then making less than 3 bogeys. So like if you go out there, he made 4 birdies, 2 bogeys, shot -2, he would cover this prop. If he made 5 birdies and I think 4 bogeys. So he only shot -1, but he did get to 5 birdies. He would also still cover this, right? So I think it's better than the strokes props just because of that. And it's probably better than the birdie prop because he could still make 4 birdies and cover it, right? And that's why I said it all comes down to the bogeys over here, but I wouldn't want to bet the bogeys on its own. So like I just it feels like maybe fantasy score might be the best. Maybe I'm just full of shit here, but that's what I'm thinking with it. And then again, the scoring average for round 1, which I think is going to be comparable for round 2, was 1.4 under par, and we've got set priced over the field average. Okay. I've talked myself into it. All right, we'll do that for the slip for the stream here, guys. It'll be Sep understrokes. It'll be Sam Burns over fantasy score. Like I said, it really comes down to Burns just not making 3-4 bogeys, and then hopefully just putting up 4 birdies. I mean, if he makes 5-6 birdies, he's going to cover his prop, right? Even if he does leak it out there with bogeys, but hopefully he can keep it a little bit cleaner for us. Just make it a little bit more sweat free, right? And then in terms of Sep, I think it's good value, right? I know he's not over here on Prize Picks, but if he was, he'd probably be at like 68 strokes, at most 68.5, like a Brian Harmon, like a Sahith Thagala. Actually, he is over here. Sorry, I take that back, right? He's at 68.5 strokes, right? So we are getting that half a stroke value. And if anything, I would be leaning his under, right? Just for the record over here in Prize Picks, I'd be leaning in the under anyways at 68.5 strokes. Let's see. Bubba Watson would eat this course alive. Yeah, maybe he would. You're right. Any rivals I like? Haven't checked it out yet, but now that you've mentioned it, we'll take a look. Why not? So let's go to PGA and see what we're working with. There's occasionally a rivals or two I like, but I only do it when I see a huge talent gap difference, and I haven't seen any yet. Nope. They all seem pretty reasonable. And if there, I'm sure there's micro edges. Like I'm sure if you look at the stats, the shots gained, like there's going to be one with somebody hitting the ball really well against somebody who maybe didn't have their best stuff in round 1, but it's just a little bit too volatile for my liking. So not really any rivals that I like there, man. But if you have any that you were thinking and you want my thoughts on them, feel free to let me know. Crush says Tom Kim at 68.5 strokes. So what is he on Prize Picks, right? He's 68 strokes. So yeah, I don't hate that, right? That was another half stroke value. What was the other one? There was Tom Kim, who I know was the half stroke value. And there was one more. Was it John Rahm? No, John Rahm's at the same projection. Was it Spieth? Yeah, no. Okay, so it's not Jordan Spieth. There was one more player. We'll find them. We'll scroll through it. There's a lot of players, which is a good problem to have, right? I'm glad that we have all the options here, but it does make it hard to find the prop you're looking for sometimes. That's for sure, especially when you can't remember who it is. Right? I'm just trying to see if I can pick them out of here. Let's see. Is it Hovland? Was Hovland 67? Yeah, he's a half stroke discrepancy. So, we'll throw him in the shopping cart for now. Again, no guarantee we're taking that. The issue is we can't take 2 unders for strokes, right? So if I was going to choose between Hovland and Tom Kim, I would probably go Hovland just because Hovland isn't injured, right? He doesn't have that, kind of X factor working against him. And then we'd have to find some sort of other prop to take. And my initial reaction is to go to these like fantasy score props. Like I said, like you have a bunch of different ways to hit it. If you make an eagle, like you're going to cover your fantasy score prop. Like there's just a bunch of different ways to hit it. And the negative things working against you, they exist, but they're not as bad as the things that are working for you. Which it sucks, right? It's not very straightforward to sell you on a fantasy score prop other than just to tell you that per the projections, there's value. And it worked today, but it's annoying, right? For the content perspective, right? To try and give you guys that same perspective I have. They have Cam Davis at 4 birdies. I mean, I know they don't have him up here, but I'd have to think
I guess not, right? They have guys like Keegan at 4 birdies too. I guess it's fair. I guess that's a semi-fair projection. See, they got Brian Harmon at 28 fantasy points. If he were to make 4 birdies and 3 bogeys, let's do the math on that, shall we? So just to give you some perspective on this, okay? If he were to tie his projection for birdies and he were to make over for bogeys, right? So he would go over this 2.5. I'll give you guys his exact score just to give you guys an idea here. So he'd make 4 birdies. Each one is worth 4 points. And with 4 birdies, he's probably going to have at least one streak, right? Where he has back-to-back birdies. And I say at least one because he might have more than one, right? So let's give him 17 points for that, right? We'll give him the 1 extra bonus point. Now, he's going to make 4 birdies and he's going to have 3 bogeys. So we have to give him another bonus point because he's going to be 1 under par by the end. And we have to subtract now the points for the bogeys, which it's 1.2 points lost per bogey. So that would be minus 3.6 points. So that'd be 14.4 points right there. And then we've got 13 holes left, right? No, I'm off on that. Sorry, 11 holes left. So then that is 11 times 1.1 plus 14.4. So just based on that alone, right? So this would be him just pushing his birdie projection and then going over on bogeys, right? So that's a pretty shitty round. Let's keep in mind, right? This would be like him playing worse than we're expecting. That's 26.5 points. That means for him to cover his prop, he just has to do something better than average, right? So that could be going under the bogey prop. That could be making 1 extra birdie, right? And having that take him over. It could be going out there and having 3 birdies in a row, right? Getting 2 extra whole points for getting the streak there 2 times in a row. Any of those things takes him over. If he makes an eagle instead of a birdie for one of those, he goes over his prop. Like, I don't know. I don't even know if we're going to take Brian Harmon here. The whole point of that, right, is to show you that, like, the baseline, like the low projection, like if you're thinking that these kind of guys don't have a good day, is like 26.5 points. And if you think they have any chance to have a better round than that, then they're projecting well over, like into the 30, 35 range. Like it's very volatile. It changes real quickly in terms of your score in that range. Let's see. I'm trying to see if like maybe Sahith makes sense for an over. Like he played well in round 1, like which is a kind of a contrast to Brian Harmon. Like he didn't look that good. Like I would never take Rose for the 50-50 prop because like he looked like complete shit today, right? Yeah, like I would never take Lee Hodges because he's a bum. We'll see. This is what I'm leaning towards right now. We might just leave it with the first slip. I might just do my research after, make sure that I'm taking all props that project well. But it's these fantasy score props, they seem low. Like, look at that. They have Aaron Wright 4.5 birdies, but at 28 fantasy points, right? Just based on their projections alone, he's projecting for 28.5 at the very least. In fact, he probably projects closer to like 29 fantasy points per the projections that they have up there. So that's just, like I said, I think it's a pretty big misprice for what they have up there. Like, I don't hate that one either. I don't think this 0.2 difference matters, by the way. It doesn't. It's like, which one do I think plays better? I don't know. We're going to leave it at that, guys. All right. That's all I got for the live stream. Of course, guys, all of my plays are going to be posted on Patreon throughout the night. I appreciate all the support here on the channel as per usual, but go through any comments or questions before the stream ends here. But of course, check out my live stream tomorrow if you're heading out now. We're doing the same thing for rounds 3 and 4. Best of luck out there with your exposure, and I hope to see you at the top of some leaderboards. Cam Young's a half-stroke difference. It's good to know when I go out there and check it out. You're so late to the stream, time to catch up. You've got some work to do, Samuel. I'll see you later, I guess. Would you take Ron Birdie or better or strokes? Probably not. He seemed priced pretty fair. I thought about it, though. Right? He's definitely due for that bounce back, so I couldn't blame you for doing it. What are my thoughts on Griot? Had the hell of a round. Loved playing him for my main slate stuff. A little bit too chalky for me in Showdown, though. So I love what I saw, but I'm going to leave it at that. Right? I'm not going to tail it for round 2. LIV Rivals, do they have them up? They don't have a LIV board up, but they have LIV Rivals up. Is that a thing? It is a thing, isn't it? I'll scan it here for a second, but I don't imagine there's going to be ones that I love. There's one prop that seems decent. All right, Frady, because I know you're looking at it, the Coke Rack one against Stenson. Maybe I'd consider taking Coke Rack, but yeah. Hey, hopefully that means we're getting a full board then, right? Because if that means we have rivals, maybe they're working on the regular projections. That might be pretty sweet. So until next time, guys, like I said, I appreciate all the support here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the round 3 stream.